Hello, everyone, and welcome to Sew Yellow For Endo 2025. I cannot believe we are over halfway through the month. I am so excited to see what you've all made. And it really is fantastic to get to share experiences. Thank you as well to everyone who's messaged after the previous lives, asking questions, telling me their experiences. It's so brilliant to hear. And I know I speak for all of our live stream guests when I say that we love that sharing experiences has such a tangible, positive impact on you all. So thank you so much. We have got another fabulous interview for you today. So I am joined by the wonderful Natalie. Hello.
Hello.
So Natalie is joining us from outside of the UK. Whereabouts are you?
So I am in the mountains of North Carolina, in the western part of the state in the US. Um, if anyone was following the news back in the fall, I'm in the area that had the hurricane. So
Oh, wow. Oh my
yeah.
goodness. Well, I mean, wow, you live in a much
Yeah.
different part of the world than we do. But thank you so much for joining us. And I think it's great. I absolutely love having international guests on this because we talk a lot about our UK context, which we
Mhm.
have to do because we have specific sort of NHS experiences and all
Right.
that stuff. But endometriosis does not discriminate on where you
No,
live.
it doesn't.
So would you like to tell us a little bit about your story, really, your
Sure.
endometriosis journey, where it started, where we are now?
So I noticed when I was about 16 or 17 that when I would have my period, I hurt really bad like in one part of my body.
Okay.
Um, it was not a cramp like people normally get. It was just like a sharp pain, um, kind of near my ovaries, but not quite.
Yeah.
Um, and then I started when I was in college or university, as y'all would call it. I started having a lot of abnormal bleeding. Um,
Okay.
so I would get my period. Well, I guess it was more of a withdrawal bleed because I was on oral contraceptives, and
Right.
you don't
Okay.
really have a period with those.
Yeah. But you're still
Um,
going to bleed, whatever you
yeah,
get. Yeah.
yeah. Um, but I once I started bleeding, I couldn't stop.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
yes. So when I was about 20, I bled for a whole month.
Ugh.
Um, and went to the emergency room, and they were kind of like, I don't know what to tell you. Um, and I got a medication called TXA, which stopping that sort of bleeding is really the only thing that it's approved for, but
It's
it has a lot of off-label uses
it's
that,
tranexamic acid, isn't it?
yeah.
Just for any UK listeners who
Mhm.
we get prescribed it, but it's not acronymed over here.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
it's very good for stopping bleeding, but that's kind
it
of
is.
yeah.
And they gave some to me in the emergency room, and then I left and went back to school, and it just kind of didn't stop. So I then was prescribed some like in pill form by
Yeah.
my OBGYN. And I should also say that getting an OBGYN in the US is a process.
Okay.
Um, so if you are experiencing symptoms, you could try going to urgent care,
Hmm.
which is kind of a step down from the emergency room. They tend to be um, owned like on a corporate level,
Right.
or as part of a health system. That's a really good option if you don't have a primary care provider.
Hmm.
They may tell you that they can't see you for that
Okay.
because they don't have ultrasound or imaging or anything like that. I used to work at urgent care, and I have had to tell people that we can't see them for that.
Uh-huh.
But if you press and say, I just want to speak to the provider, generally they will at least talk to you and give you a referral to OBGYN.
Okay.
Um, it takes a long time to get in, and generally, unless the practice is something called a federally qualified healthcare provider,
Hmm.
which is basically subsidized by the government for the moment.
Yeah.
Things are changing very quickly over here.
Yes, they are.
Um,
Yeah.
but this is current as of March 9th. you can go to them, and if you don't have insurance, they will generally be able to see you on a sliding scale based
Mhm.
on your income. But if you get referred to a provider that is in private practice, so not part of a health system or part of a larger health system, generally they will require you to have some form of insurance because it is expensive.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think that's a really interesting point because I was doing some research before we had a chat, and the
Mhm.
diagnosis time for endometriosis in the US is half the time it is in the UK.
Yeah,
So it's an average in the US of like 4.5 years, and for us, it's 8.5.
yeah.
And I think it's partially obviously because if you do have more money in the US system, you probably can expedite that a bit more.
Mhm.
Um, but it's really interesting because we have such a backlog.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I love the NHS. I would not live anywhere with it. Like I love it. It's
Mhm.
fantastic. It keeps me literally alive in a variety of
Right.
ways. Um,
Right.
but it is interesting to think about settings where socioeconomic disparity as well can have such a massive impact on your ability to get a diagnosis.
Yes, I am very privileged because I have always had health insurance. I have never been without health insurance.
Okay.
Um, and that's a really big deal
Mhm.
for getting care, for anything.
So just because we will have listeners
Yeah.
who watchers, because we're on YouTube,
Yeah.
who don't understand how it works, I'm
Mhm.
not asking you to explain the whole American medical system at all, but just as a rough thing, if you don't have insurance, what care can you access, if any?
So you can access most care if you can afford to pay for it.
Right, and you pay full whack, I guess.
So it depends. A lot of I was speaking about urgent cares earlier. A lot of them will have like a set amount that you pay up front to be seen without insurance.
Right.
So at my urgent care, it was $150.
Okay,
Um,
that's insane. Uh, that's because
yeah,
obviously my context
yeah.
is insane.
Um,
But yeah,
if
so that you'd have that
you
up front before you can see anyone.
up front before you see anybody, if you are prescribed a medication, you'll have to pay for that out of pocket at the pharmacy. That's not in my state. That's not something that they can dispense to you um, at the clinic. And it should also be said that healthcare varies a lot by state as well with what they're allowed to do. And I am in North Carolina, just for the purposes of this. If you have something done at a hospital, um, the hospital that I go to has a 40% self pay discount.
Right. So,
Um, so let's say your procedure would be $1,000 without insurance. You would be responsible for 600. And generally they do have people who call you and say, this is your estimate for how much this is going to be. Hospitals are required to give you a good faith estimate
right. Okay.
um, for how much it's going to be, but they can also bill you for more at the end if it ends up being more
Wow.
than they said it would. Um,
So when we look at your story and when we go through more of what you've been going through, we do have to keep in mind it's a very different system.
it's a very different system, and um, I've been lucky in that I live or have lived. I don't really currently live in a place like this, but I have lived in very populated areas
Yeah.
that have robust healthcare systems
Mm.
because there is the population to support it. If you live like in the middle of nowhere, you're probably going to have like a little county hospital that doesn't have a lot of specialties.
Yeah.
Um, and then like a primary care office and probably an OB/GYN office just because people are having babies everywhere.
Yeah,
So
that's the one thing about this
mhm.
being treated as a gynae condition is at least if there's an antenatal clinic or somewhere people are giving birth, there will be someone somewhere who
Yeah,
knows
yeah.
how to like ultrasound you. But it is wild. I mean, we have a similar issue in rural parts of the UK. Like I'm
Mhm,
Scottish,
mhm.
and very rural parts, like where my parents live in Scotland, they have a hospital, but my mum has to fly to Aberdeen for all of her lung care and things like
Yeah,
that because they just don't
yeah.
have the staff and the machines and the yeah.
Mhm.
But again, the NHS will refer you to a hospital that can do it.
Right.
Generally, if you
Um,
if you can fight hard enough and get them to do it, they
mhm.
have to.
Yeah,
Not to say they want to, but they will. Um,
Right.
but I guess for you, do you have a choice of what hospital you go to?
It depends if so, as someone who has insurance, um, your insurance has a network.
Right, okay.
So that is like a list of doctors and hospitals that they have a contract with.
Right, okay.
Um, what I see a lot in the job that I do now is just because your doctor is a network doesn't mean that the hospital is a network.
Right. Okay, that's
Um,
helpful. Right.
but if you have, so there are basically four major insurance companies in the US. There's Blue Cross Blue Shield, United Healthcare, Aetna, and Cigna.
Right, okay.
And most hospitals tend to be contracted with those four.
Right,
If
okay.
you have a different insurance company, it's kind of hit or miss. And if you are on Medicare or have Medicaid, so Medicare is for people who are disabled or retired.
Hmm.
Medicaid is for people who are, I guess, they call it like financially needy in some way.
Okay.
Um, you Most places in your state will take your insurance because it is, from the government. So,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay. So
um,
when we continue now, and we will get back to your story now, I promise.
yeah,
But it's just really useful context because for a lot of the
yeah,
people listening, and for my audience particularly as well, they won't. I mean, most people don't know how it works in the UK, let alone
yeah,
abroad. So when you're talking about going to university or college for you, and going to walk-ins, that's stuff that's covered by your insurance. Or is
yes.
that, yeah.
Um, it is it is covered. I won't get into deductibles and everything like that, but yeah, yes, it
Broadly
is covered.
speaking, it's sort of
Broadly, it is covered.
yeah.
After I got out of college, I stayed in the area
Mhm.
that I went to school in. So I was able to keep seeing the same OBGYN practice that I had been seeing.
Okay. And
Um,
when you went to them very first, the very first time you saw them,
mhm.
were you still on the tranexamic acid?
No.
Okay.
So I only got that after I saw them the first time. I should say, apart from endometriosis, I have issues with cysts on my ovaries. I don't have PCOS.
Okay.
I grow one giant cyst at a time.
You lucky thing. That's
Yes.
yeah. Oh
So
dear.
my very first year of college, I had to go to the emergency room because I had a very large ovarian cyst and a kidney stone on the same side at the same time.
Oh my God, you poor thing.
Yeah, and so um, when I from that ER visit is when I got referred to the OBGYN practice.
Okay.
And if you go to a hospital, they are going to refer you within their same health system if they have
Okay.
the specialty.
So then you stay in
Um,
the area and you get to keep seeing that
I
person
get to
because you're
keep
around
seeing
there.
them, and
Yeah.
I am continuing to have the issue where I just can't stop bleeding.
Yeah.
And my doctor was like, you know, you're on the pill. You don't have to take your like week long breaks. You can just keep taking it continuously. So that's what I did for
Yeah.
like 3 years, and it was great.
Okay.
Um, but I started to notice that I felt really bloated like all the time.
Yeah.
And I just kind of like woke up one day and my pants didn't fit and like I hadn't gained any weight. It was like things were just kind of moving around.
Yeah.
Um, and so um, I started having, pain kind of like I do when I get a cyst. So I was like, I must have like another really big cyst again. Like, let me see if anybody can see me about this. And by this point, I had moved and I did not have an OBGYN provider anymore.
Okay.
And so I went through um, my normal primary care provider and she referred me for an ultrasound. I did have a cyst, but it was not that big. Like it was not big enough to be causing me these problems.
Okay.
And so I like to be clear, I was having trouble sitting for long periods. I run as well. So I was having pain like when I was running.
Yeah.
Um, I was like, something's really
Yeah,
wrong. Like,
something's, you know your body well enough to be like this. Like as you say, there's something very strange, and I think people without any gynae problems or any health problems, because there are people out there with, unbelievably to me, with no chronic health problems at all.
lucky
So,
them.
yeah, exactly, I know. But you do meet people who've been to the doctors twice in 20 years. And I'm like, how? Um,
Mhm.
but there is a certain level where you go, oh, well, that's really, really sore, but I know
Yeah.
what it is. So in your
Mhm.
case, I'm pretty sure that's a cyst. Or for me, it used to be, oh, I can just feel myself ovulating. That's what that is.
Yeah.
Um, it's not pleasant. It's
No.
horrible, but you know what it is. So when you start having enough problems where you're like, no, no, this has to be something else. It's a big deal
Mhm.
because you do get to know your body.
It
So if you
is.
feel this big mystery thing, like not be able to sit down, I'm assuming trousers may have been a problem.
Not
They're like
really.
problems with constriction.
It wasn't so much what I was wearing, it's like the way that my body was positioned.
Right, okay.
And with running, it was like the bouncing that was uncomfy.
Okay.
Um, so because I sit like a shrimp. So
Don't we all?
and I was working in a job at that time where I had to sit all day.
Okay.
So I thought it was just kind of because I was sitting so much as well. Um, but we went on, it wasn't going away, and it was causing me a lot of pain. So my new OBGYN that I was referred to said, why don't we just go ahead and schedule laparoscopic surgery to take it out?
Yeah.
Um, because we're not really getting anywhere with this. Normally it would resolve by now. He's like, we can keep waiting to see if it does.
Yeah.
And I said, I can't keep doing this.
Yeah.
Please,
I can't live like this. Yeah.
can we please just schedule the surgery? And he said, fine. So um, a couple, not even maybe 2 weeks before I was scheduled to have the surgery, my cyst resolved itself. Um, so it's worth noting that sometimes your cyst resolving itself can have the same symptoms as your ovary torsioning.
Oh, okay.
Um, so I was having really bad abdominal pain. I had started bleeding again. And I was like, this is really bad. So generally your OBGYN practice or like your regular doctor's office, whoever, they'll have a provider that's on call. So
Okay.
even if it's closed, you can call, leave a message, and someone will call you back.
Uh-huh.
Um, and they called me back and told me to go back to the emergency room. So I did. And, it had resolved. I didn't have to have the surgery, whatever. So I scheduled a follow up with my OBGYN provider, and um, I think with how bad this is hurting you, and since you're still hurting today, even though it's gone, he said, I think we need to think about if this could be endometriosis.
And that's the first time that was mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
So how many years are we talking between when you first noticed problems and the first time someone actually said it?
So about 8. I also there is because I am from the South.
Mhm.
There is a lot of um, shame and fear of being impolite
Right.
to mention things like that, and also um, in the Southern culture that I was raised in, there is a fear that if you mention anything like that, everyone's going to think that you're having sex.
Right, okay. Even though the two are
Um,
in no way related, but
mhm.
yeah, it's gynae and thus sex.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
and going on birth control is contentious for the same reason. Um, but that was the first time it was mentioned. I was about, like I said, I was about 16 when that first started. It took until I had my very first like confirmed cyst at almost 19 for me to start mentioning any of this to anybody.
Okay.
Um, and I just kind of plodded along as best I could. And then it was mentioned for the first time last year. So yeah, I'm turning 25 this year. So I was about 23, 24.
Yeah. So we're talking, yeah, like 8 years
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
before anyone even said the word.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. So did
Um,
you then go on to have your surgery?
I didn't actually,
Okay.
because with insurance, you have to worry about things being considered investigational for them to approve it and pay for it.
Okay.
So since the cyst was gone and we had documentation that it was gone, I
It would
was,
have been, you wouldn't have had the same rationale for them to pay for it as you need it because,
mhm.
right, okay.
So I have a birth defect called a cavernous hemangioma. So I've had a lot of surgery, and so I know how surgery auths work.
Yeah.
Um, and I was like, I don't want to do this. So what we did instead is I was put on a medication called norethindrone.
Yep.
Um, and he was like, let's see if this helps. And if it does help, you probably have endometriosis. I just can't put that in your chart because we have to do the surgery for me to say that you do.
Yes, because that's the only way of concrete
Mhm,
confirming you have it,
mhm.
which causes
So,
many women many, many problems. The fact that you have to confirm it via surgery, but you often have to have enough evidence to get surgery.
yes,
Yeah.
correct. It's the same. Um, we're just fighting private insurance companies and not the government.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. No, sorry, I don't mean to laugh, but it's nice to know it's the same the world over.
yeah,
It's
no,
the
it's
same.
nice. It's nice for me too because I'm
Yeah.
like, this.
Oh, it's treated as, and this made me so angry when I had my surgery. It's treated as an elective surgery here.
Yes.
And it's like I don't want it. Like
Yeah. Well,
I'm not
so
choosing. Like
right.
I'm just
So
in agony. But yeah, it's not. So you will get shunted down lists if other people come in bleeding with limbs hanging off,
mhm,
which is fair enough.
it
But
is.
it shouldn't be treated as elective ever.
So in my job, I work with patients who are having cardiac procedures done,
Okay.
and unless you come in like on an ambulance and they have to do it right then,
Yeah.
if you're having like cardiac bypass surgery, if
Uh-huh.
they're not doing it as an emergency, it's still considered elective.
What?
Yes.
What?
Yes.
So what's the barrier then if you can sign off on it or not?
Um, so for stuff like that, they go based off symptoms and like other findings and things like that. The issue with most gynecological problems is there's only so much you can do
Yeah.
before you have to just be like, can we please just look inside and see
Yeah.
what's going on?
Yeah, because you just can't, even if it's a laparoscopy, it's still, they need to stick a camera in there. There's no other way to
Yeah,
do it.
right.
Jesus.
So,
So yeah, so you have the same problem. So now they gave you the medication, the
and it
surgery.
works. It's
Okay,
working. Um,
good.
I feel better, so that's good. But yeah, I still haven't had my surgery because my husband is finishing up his master's program and we're about to move again. So I would like to not be in the process of uprooting my life when I have this done.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
so I'm kind of just waiting to see how it progresses. And honestly, I think that the conversation will come up again when I get another cyst.
probably, yeah. Because if they can schedule the surgery at the right
Mm-hmm.
time
Mm-hmm.
to get your cyst, and then what happened with me is I had my appendix out, and they went,
Mm-hmm.
"Oh yeah, by the way, all of this is in here."
Yeah.
And they referred me because of that. But I'm like, I think that cut still would have been about 8 years for me, but it cut years off my diagnosis time, uh,
Right. Right.
having an unrelated surgery where
Mm-hmm.
obviously they're still in your pelvic cavity. And
Right.
if they see it, like they assume they will with you when
Mm-hmm.
I don't want you to have another cyst, but I do want you to have a successful endometriosis surgery. So
I do too.
it's um but yeah, once you do, it's so much easier because once a surgeon has said, no, no, that's in there, a
Mm-hmm.
lot of doors open.
Right. It's just difficult to um, get through all the barriers that are in place to have things like that.
No, definitely. And there's so many barriers for women in healthcare before we
Yes,
then get to
there are.
economic and insurance barriers as well.
I just, but and because I don't work with patients directly. I work like in like an administration department. I work with insurance companies. That's why I know.
Yeah. You know the drill. You know how it
Yeah.
works. But
Um,
also it's kind of stressful to have to do it for yourself, I guess, when you're doing it for other people as well.
um, it's easier to do it for other people than it is to do it for myself because I so there is a big. I'm not allowed to have anything to do with um, my own health information. That's a really big no-no.
Yeah.
Um, so being able to not have to worry about like what the insurance company is saying until somebody else tells me is great,
Yeah.
honestly.
So I guess I have two questions, and as always with these interviews, you can say as much or as little as you want. You know, it's your space. Um, you mentioned obviously there's quite a big cultural
Yeah,
community thing here as well about not speaking about these things.
yeah,
Do you think it has been like, do you think if you'd been in a different area of the country, you would have been able to get support earlier, better support, would have felt more
no,
saying something?
I don't think so because so I when I was in college, I lived in the northeastern part of the U.S.
Uh-huh. Okay,
Um,
so you were up there when you tried that. Okay.
yeah, um, and I think that it's more people, and like I like to make fun of the South because I'm from here, and people like to make fun of the South in general, but it's really not that different for a lot of these things as people think it is.
Mhm. Oh, it's just interesting because I know you said about like even going on birth control and that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
But I do think the US and the UK are very different for certain
Yes,
things. And
yes,
going on birth control is much more acceptable in the UK, I think just
mhm.
generally.
Yeah,
It's much more, as also there's a lot more confidentiality. Like you can go on it at 16, your parents won't know
mhm.
because no one's paying for it. It doesn't have to go on your insurance. It doesn't have to go on anything like that. It
Right.
just
So,
happens.
and before you turn 18 here, you're, I believe it may be different if you are seeking um, care for pregnancy in some places, but I'm not completely sure about that. Um, but before I turned 18, my mom signed all my consents. She signed all my privacy notices, guarantor information, so like who's going to pay for it. But you don't start signing those forms for yourself until you turn 18.
Right, okay. So yeah,
And you,
it is different in that way.
it is different, and you have to be accompanied by a parent or guardian um, if you're being seen. So you can't, like the provider, unless it's like an emergency or they ask your parent to step out. So when I turned 13, we started doing my physicals with just me and the doctor.
Right, okay.
Um, but like my mom was still in the building.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of rules about like, um, what the provider is allowed to do without a parent
Mhm.
until you turn 18,
Which is
or unless.
which is so interesting because I think we have it for some things here, but not for others.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
like I would have gone on the pill in exactly the same situation as you actually, in terms
Mhm.
of like, we think this will help you, and then just take it straight through and stop bleeding forever.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, but yeah, it's I would have gone on when I was like 15, 16, and my parents weren't told because
Yeah.
I got
So
honest.
I went on it when I was just about to turn 16. Um, and my mom was for it because they put me on it for my mood.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. That's an interesting conversation as well. So we have a couple of minutes left in this interview.
Yeah.
I would love to know what your advice would be either to your younger self or to anyone going through the same sort of experience as you. Is there anything you feel you've learned that you want to share or anything like that?
This is a cliche because people say this all the time, but you need to advocate for yourself.
Yeah.
If something is wrong, you need to press about it. They I'm not someone who's going to say that healthcare providers don't know what they're talking about, because that's not true. They
No,
have a
of
lot of
course not.
training and things like that. But at the end of the day, like you know how you feel, and it's difficult for other people to know how you feel.
Yeah, it's an invisible condition in that way. And
Mhm.
as you say, like I have the utmost respect for healthcare providers. I've had some great ones. I've had some
Mhm.
terrible ones. But normally what makes them terrible is not their knowledge.
Right.
It's their manner or how they treat your experience and the way you're
Mhm.
reporting you. They know their stuff,
Yeah.
but it is, well, also depending on the age of the GP or the hospital, like how much experience they've got with it.
Mhm.
But there are GPs out there or doctors out there like the one I had who I had kidney stones and he told me I had post-exercise soreness. And I was like,
No.
no, trust me.
No.
But then you also have ones who are amazing, and it's,
Mhm.
as you say, you kind of just have to make a nuisance of yourself. Like you have to.
Yeah. So when I had my when my cyst resolved when I went to the ER right before I was supposed to have my surgery,
Mhm.
um, the doctor in the ER, we don't believe that she read my ultrasound report, because I had been there for a long time and I was being really pushy about being able to leave.
Yeah,
Um, and so she told me, no, your cyst is still there. You're just having breakthrough bleeding because of your contraception, so you can still have your surgery. And um, I actually had the ultrasound report in my patient portal on my phone, and I knew that that's not what it said.
yeah.
Um,
You've read it, you've seen it, you know that's not what it
mhm.
says.
And so I called my OBGYN office the next day and I said, hey, I really need to see my doctor just for a second opinion.
Yeah. Which is so important to do there. And you
Mhm.
can, for UK listeners, you can request a different GP. You're allowed
Mhm.
to do that. You can absolutely say, like the woman who told me in her own words, man up, periods are sore, when I was fainting and couldn't stand on my left leg. That's not normal.
No.
If the person, as you say, clearly hasn't read your notes, because the one thing doctors are universally is busy.
Mhm.
So if they haven't read your notes, or if they haven't, maybe they're having a bad day and they're not being maybe as conscientious as they would be other times, you can ask for a second opinion. It's not only allowed, it's kind of your right, really. Particularly in your case, if you're paying for the treatment. It's absolutely your right.
Yeah, I mean, you have to pay for it again. But yeah, so my I guess my other piece of advice would be, if the people you're seeing offer a patient portal, take advantage of it, because it's good for billing because you can see like your statements and stuff. Um, but you can also see your test results. I will say that looking at your test results before your doctor tells you about them can be a bad idea because you can see something that scares you and
Yes,
then you freak out. But just having that reference is good.
definitely. And from a UK perspective, we do have patient portals. Where some doctors have them where you can see you can't see the scan, but you can see like your results. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I know it's a lot of admin, but keep copies of everything.
Mm-hmm.
Like I still have all of my surgery notes. I have like a copy of my ECG and stuff like because sometimes they give you a hard copy. Keep them
Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
there will be a time where you move country or you move state or you move county and they lost all my medical records when I moved from Scotland to England. I had nothing from the age of 0 to 18 when I moved
Yeah.
out here. And I was like, that's not right. I have severe asthma and several serious allergies, like
Yeah.
missing like this much paperwork. Luckily I had loads of it printed. So I took it.
Mm-hmm.
I was like,
Mm-hmm.
scan it in. But yeah, if you're in an American context, patient portals sound like an absolute dream if you can see
Yeah.
everything in one place. And
Yeah.
in
And
the
it,
NHS, we have a thing called EMIS portal, which I'm pretty sure all GPs have access to.
mhm.
So definitely chase that if your GP hasn't given you the ability to access that.
And if you're, so we have an electronic medical record system called Epic over here.
Okay.
And Epic from different systems they all talk to each other.
Yeah,
So your doctor will be able to see the other visits you've had and things like that.
perfect. So to round up, firstly, thank you so much for giving us an international perspective. We've had such a lovely time. I hope you've enjoyed it. I've loved
Yeah,
speaking with you. It's been
I
great.
have.
Um, talk about it. make a nuisance, advocate for yourself.
Mhm.
And although it's horrible to have to do your own admin, it is worth doing. It is
Yes.
worth keeping those records, looking at them, chasing, prodding, because it's your experience, isn't it?
Mhm.
No one knows how you're feeling, as you so beautifully said.
Mhm.
So, thank you so much, Natalie. I hope this has
Thank
been fun.
you.
I have
It
loved
has been.
speaking to you. Oh, thank you. That's so great to hear. And thank you for being a part of the challenge as well. It
Absolutely.
is that it's so important for these interviews to display loads of different experiences. So I'm really
Mhm.
grateful for you bringing your own experiences of cysts and of endometriosis and of where
Yeah.
you are now. So remember that if you have enjoyed this live, give it a like, share it with your friends, particularly anyone who you think might have endometriosis. And thank you so much for being a part of Sew Yellow For Endo 2025.